Life, whether you believe it started as a nucleic acid, bacteria rose out of the sea, formed from the sky, or have religious belief, Stephen Johnson's book, Where Good Ideas Come From, will enable you to see where our vibrant liquid networks evolved from. In the 1830s, Charles Darwin traveled to the Keeling Islands and parted the work of Charles Lyell, his atoll theory. Darwin marveled at all the different life forms. Darwin established the paradox in terms of all the staggering amount of life in a nutrient-poor soil and area. Max Kliber was a Swiss scientist that studied the heartbeats of animals, negative quarter power scaling, plotted mass versus metabolism on a logarithmic grid. Equations gave order to chaos. The physicist Jeffrey used this rule to analyze the heart and the beat of a city. What we discovered was it takes 10 years to develop a good idea. The long zoom in nature perspective, we see cells, human brains, species, ecosystems, global evolution, and from the culture side, we see ideas, workspaces, organizations, settlements, and information networks. Open collaborative workspace yield the biggest gains. During the Age of Enlightenment, people gathered in the coffee houses of England, and the artists had the great salons of Paris. The patrons could share their ideas and make connections with each other. This was a means of a liquid network. The adjacent possible sets up avenues of exploration, collaborating, and creating. Johnson gives us the analogy of the rooms of a house, which have doors that take us in new directions. The obstetricians in Air set up incubators in Liberia and Ethiopia after many babies had died. The incubators were set with parts from the Toyota 4Runners. They knew how to repair incubators then. The FBI failed with the hunch terrorists were taking flight training for mass destruction. The result was the tragedy of 9/11. Ideas do need to connect. Evolutionary theorist Jacob spoke of the terms tinkerers and how our bodies are made by large, old body parts put together to form new. Jay Gould came upon tires that were sandals made out of tires and Keith in Nairobi and New Delhi. Here we learn of recombination and the concept of the adjacent possible. Johnson speaks of the connected mind with the synapse firing in neurons and the limited connections between those neurons. The essential question becomes, how do we push our brains further into these creative networks? Kaufman coined the term adjacent possible. In 1964, Kussler published The Act of Creation, which speaks of intellectual disciplines colliding. Men believe that Russian scientists created the periodic table of elements after he had a dream about atomic weight. The brain requires a river period of electrical chaos where neurons are out of sync. Slow hunches need to connect. In the 1970s, psychologist and intellectual historian Gruber decided to visit Darwin's notebook. They revealed a different account. What he noticed, Darwin notices the variation, natural selection, competition, but he fails to come up with a reconfiguration. Aaron Miss Darwin, Charles's grandfather, wrote one of the most famous commonplace notebooks. Tim Berners-Lee also read the Victorian guide, Require Within Everything. It is hereupon Berners-Lee devises a way to create the World Wide Web. It did take him 10 years. Thatcher, a brain scientist at the University of South Florida, studied brains that seemed to seek out noise. What he found was these brains operated and did much better on IQ tests. Johnson states, chance favors the connected mind. Serendipitous ideas lead to new ideas. Johnson talks about the World Wide Web and newspapers as being serendipitous. Panasiad and Wilson thought their telescope was broken until a Princeton nuclear physicist surmised that it was cosmic background noise from the Big Bang. In quoting Johnson, two extreme errors are fatal. Being right keeps you in place. Being wrong forces you to explore. Exaptation is the idea that objects can be refigured for new. Pliny the Elder was working with grapes and wine with his countrymen, and they created the wine press. Decades later, Gutenberg took the components and created the printing press, which was revolutionary. the idea of exaptation. Slow hunches often can propel us further. Serendipitous chance mistakes take us a new direction. Allow times to connect. John Locke's indexing method served a pathway for collective thought. We need to strike a balance between chaos and order. Serendipitous ideas allow us to have a adjacent possible. Allow time for patterns to form. Pieces often fall into place like a puzzle. Ideas need a place to anchor. New discoveries can be very meaningful. In 1830, Louis Daguerre spent years trying to coax images of iodized silver plates. One night, he locked his images in a cabinet with mercury. The next morning, he found the perfect image. Wilson Greenbatch was a radio hand operator who worked with a surgeon. During the surgery, he picked up the wrong resistor. The result, Greenback and Jardin created the first human pacemaker. A platform is a kind of emergent behavior. It builds strength and connection. Examples are a dam built by a beaver. It allows other life forms to prosper there. Johnson speaks of quadrants. The fourth quadrant is a non-market network. Here, there are collaborative groups where ideas roam freely, creativity abounds, and the adjacent possible liquid network, serendipitous, slow hunches, exaptation, and